In this tutorial series, we'll be going through MetaSounds node by node for the Unreal Engine, learning how to go from beginner to complicated in game-driven sounds and procedurally generated music.
All right, today we've already got an audio envelope that's pinching off a piece of audio from this triangle-shaped frequency modulation, oscillation, and this is what we have here. This is covered in previous tutorials. It's a simple pinch off of this. This would be a forever generating tone. This pinches a piece off at a certain attack and release, which gives us kind of this heartbeat monitor sound. The reason it finishes it all is because we have it when the envelope is done to execute that the sound is finished. In a previous tutorial, we covered that you can create your own inputs and outputs. We created an input here. I'm going to take our custom created input and I'm going to connect it to the onFinished. That way it'll run forever without the compiler being upset. You can see now the sound doesn't stop unless I tell it to stop. Because today we're going to talk about generating tones on a beat. There's all sorts of different triggers you can use to move, create, and change the flow of sounds. But we're going to, you could trigger once, pipe, repeat, or all sorts of different things. Filter, delay, use a counter. We're just going to create a repeating filter. Now this repeating filter, it can start, this is essentially the event begin play for the MetaSound. It can start and stop when we tell it to. We're just going to tell it to start forever. And when it repeats, it will then trigger this sound, this envelope, and so we will continually take more and more pinches off this triangle sound. If you connected the sync to it, you'll get more consistent sound. This triangle wave will always start when the envelope starts. If you don't connect the sync, you won't notice much of a difference, but the sound will not necessarily line up. Where you're starting the pinch won't necessarily line up every time. Imagine pinching off a piece of cake. So let's hear what happens. That sounds very concerning, right? This is the period of repeating. This will repeat the trigger until we tell it to stop. Right now we have nothing going into the stop, but we could also trigger this custom input. We could have something come in from outside of the MetaSound to stop the repeat as well, or there's all sorts of ways this stop will be hooked up or could be hooked up in the future. But for the purposes of this tutorial, we're just going to look at the trigger repeat node. So the period is how many times per second it will trigger. And the number of repeats is how many times it will do it. With 0, it will repeat infinitely. But if we put in a number like 10, it'll just do it 10 times. Now remember, the sound will play forever until you have something turning it off. That essentially is the trigger repeat.
This tutorial series is brought to you by my MetaSound Starter Pack. If you're looking for more complicated examples on how to utilize procedurally generated music and game-driven sounds inside of your projects, you might want to give it a look. More details in the description below. This is Space Dodo, where we talk about games and game development.